Welcome! It's your man Insomniac, back with another interesting watch review. Big shout out to Juan for sending this one in. Today we're looking at something pretty cool. This is a watch that Orient put out back in the early 2000s. It has been out of production for a while, and to be honest, I didn't even know that this watch existed till he sent me an email about reviewing it, so I'm pretty excited to take a look at it. Before we dive right in, just remember that the watch specs are now down in the video description. Let's get into the watch. The case on this watch is excellent, and at first glance you might not understand why. Well, there isn't much to it, which is what I like here. At over 40 millimeters, with a complicated dial, you really want as much of the real estate as possible reserved for the dial, without adding a ton of size to the watch as a whole. So what you have here is a case that isn't much larger than the dial at all. It's also thin in terms of height, and has a really short lug-to-lug length, which makes the footprint on the wrist actually seem smaller than 40 millimeters, which is excellent. The finishing is well done. Keep in mind that this watch isn't even close to new, yet the polished and brushed steel finishes look fantastic. There's a subtle textured pattern around the fixed bezel. You have a screw-down case back with basic information about the watch engraved into it. And on the right side you have two crowns and a pusher, all of which are small yet large enough to be used easily. Like I said, I actually think this is an excellent case. It's handsome and well made, but really doesn't make a statement. It's here to hold the dial and the mechanism. I like it. The dial on this watch is very practical in terms of its layout. Despite having multiple complications, one of which takes up a lot of interior space here, the overall layout is clean, simple, and elegant. The backdrop is a beautiful deep blue, which creates a great contrast with all of the white and polished steel. At the very outer edge, you have an internal rotating bezel for the slide rule, with the second set of numerals and markers for the slide rule right below that on the outer edge of the flat part of the dial. And as you can see here, despite there being so many numerals and markers for the slide rule, you can easily read it all. It's not too small or cramped to be legible. Then separate from all that, you have the rest of the dial essentially. The main time is shown with these small but present applied markers, with a small but legible printed minute track between those markers. You have the Orient logo under the 12 and the water resistance text at the 9 o'clock position, both of which add balance to the dial with the other two complications at 3 and 6. There's a nice polished border around the date window, and down at the 6 o'clock position you have a large day indicator. The hands are excellent. Not only are they nicely polished and stylistically compatible with the dial as a whole, but they're not very wide, which is excellent because they don't cover the date window or the day indicator enough that they're ever really unreadable. It's just a nice, well thought out dial. You have three usable complications on this watch. Your date window is large, the numeral for the date is centered well and easy to read. Your day indicator is very simple to read. The triangle points at the day of the week. It's that simple. And adjusting the day indicator is even more simple. Remember that pusher I mentioned earlier? You just push that to adjust the day. Love it. Lastly, you have the slide rule. How often do you see a slide rule on a watch outside of something like maybe a Breitling Navitimer? I'm not going to turn this video into a tutorial on how to use a slide rule, but there are actually plenty of useful functions for this complication, if your phone isn't within arm's reach anyway. And it's easy to adjust using the lower crown here, which rotates the bezel in here. So not only do all the complications work well, but they're useful complications, and they're all easy to use and adjust. The lume on this watch is the only thing that I can say is pretty bad. You have tiny slivers of luminescent filling in all of the hour markers, and long but very thin strips of lume on the hour and minute hands, but even with a full charge, they don't glow very bright and don't last very long. Time at a glance on this watch is excellent. As mentioned earlier, the very dense and complicated looking slide rule function doesn't interfere with the timekeeping part of the dial at all, and the rest is very open and simple. The hands are a great length with the minute and second hands stretching out to the minute track, and the contrast is excellent against the dark backdrop, which makes finding the time in this watch at a quick glance a breeze. Really, the only thing that keeps this section from a perfect score for me is the fact that the markers for the minute track are very small, so you do have to take a second to focus in on which one the hand is pointing at, but overall, very good. The bracelet on this watch is very nice. Visually, it's a fairly standard 5-section design with brushed outer and inner links, separated by those thin polished intersections, but I like how the polished sections are actually slightly recessed, giving the bracelet more depth and texture than with a lot of other bracelets of this same style. The push button deployant clasp has fine adjusters for a more precise wrist fitment, and it works well, keeping the bracelet solid on the wrist throughout the day. The bracelet balances the watch body well, and I found it to be pretty comfortable throughout the day, so it's a great bracelet for this watch. Last but not least, we have value. And as I told you earlier, this watch went out of production a while ago, but you still see them pop up on watch sites or on eBay from time to time in excellent condition for anywhere between $200 and $400. For that price, you're getting a well-made Japanese mechanical watch with a unique complication, handsome aesthetics, and an in-house movement for less than most mechanical watches made today. Personally, I think this is a great value for what you're getting here, and you get the bonus of owning something that's fairly unique on top of it. If you have one of these, leave comments and let us know what you think of your Orient Kingmaster slide rule. And if you have any watches that you want to see reviewed on the channel, be sure to email me at shouldItimeThis@gmail.com. Until next time.